Thank you very much again for like the colleagues for inviting me here to speak today. I speak to you from Melbourne, Australia, and so I'm just trying to control, and therefore I acknowledge that I am on the land of the Kulin Nation of the Wurundjeri people, the unceded lands of where we conduct business as a university, but also where I live here in the city of Glen Ira. And I respectfully acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging as a migrant here in Australia who was embraced as a Filipino who came here as a student more than 20 years ago. And so the work that I do represents the work that I have, or the work that I will speak to represents the work that has been the product of a lot of life-changing experiences for myself. So the truth is that I draw on that experience from other people. And I've been lucky to be able to work in the academe, but also to work in civil society. So I draw from those environments in terms of civil society experiences in the Philippines. And I think, as Amitabh talked about, the Philippines still has Duterte. I was born in the time of martial law. I was born in the time of President Marcos. And so that was a formative experience for me itself. And the experience that Eric talks about in terms of the subtle racism that one experiences when you come to a new country, and the experiences one has as a young gay Asian man in Australia, you can experience those tensions. And so these are the things that are really crucial. And I will invite you, because that's part of the conversation, to be able to reflect on your own global citizenship education, not the education that you were given in schools alone, but the learning how to be global citizenship. Because often when we become educators, we forget our own conscientization processes. We forget, where did this first insight to become an activist come from? What was the core issue that I was fighting for? When we start to talk about pedagogy, then it all of a sudden becomes curriculum. But curriculum, essentially from an adult learning perspective, but even as a teacher, curriculum is life. And we often forget that it's the lives that people live that will inspire them to see the change. Yes, as facilitators, we need to be able to facilitate that, the mirror to show them. But at the same time, I think it's really important for us, if we are to be able to sustain and forge a new path, is to engage with individuals, with communities, with our students, with our learners in whatever age they might be, to be able to reflect on what is this inequality that they are seeing. Because even if we talk about the realities of inequalities, it is very different in different parts of the world. The realities of COVID are very different in different parts of the world. We have been very lucky in Australia. We're so risk averse. We've just come out of a lockdown in Melbourne, and a lockdown happens when you have 75 people converting into positive across a period of 2 to 3 weeks. So that's a lockdown, okay? Because it's really risk averse. And so we're becoming a closed country. But then it doesn't mean that there isn't inequality that happens here. And so this is the context. I haven't gone of what I want to speak with, but I'd like to invite you into the chat box, because I can't handle the Slack and the chat box in Zoom. Have a look at these images. These are the cover pictures of UNESCO Global Citizenship Education reports. And in the chat box, can you tell me, what do you notice about what's on the cover? Just for people who have been chatting earlier, if you can just quickly chat and people have a look, what do you notice about the cover pages of this Global Citizenship Education? So for those who are not reading, smiling children, rainbow, all bright, solidarity, color, a focus. Oh, that was very quickly. Oh, diversity, but children, rainbow, happy, okay? Completely innocent. Is this the kind of global citizenship that we are actually looking at? When we hear what Amitabh spoke about, when we hear about what Eric spoke about, I really think it's important to have a positive view. But a lot of the focus really is on children. And for us, if we have to have children to become global citizens in the future, we will not have a climate to talk about. We will not have a planet to speak about, because if that's who we are trying to, and I'm not saying it is not important to start when they are young, but the urgency, the revolutionary times that Eric talks about and that Amitabh talks about, the urgency is now. And then therefore, it is really important for us to be able to, and I speak for looking at as an adult educator, that it is the adults who make decisions. It is the adults who make political decisions. It is adults who vote in elections. Young people, of course, and adults vote in elections. So it is the kind of adult learning that happens not just for young people. And I'm not again saying it isn't important to build a generation that will ensure that they continue to have global citizenship as part of the core. But it is the urgency now for us. So if UNESCO calls for target 4.7 in global citizenship education, you cannot have covers that are just about children. And therefore, the next thing I would ask you, therefore, is, again, in the chat box, can you identify how did you really learn to become a global citizen? In the chat box, can you think, was it a special teacher? Was it a particular experience? What was it that actually shaped you to see yourself as a global citizenship? And again, part of that is what we called about development education. I really think it's important people talk about parents, my mother, traveling as an adult through family and community actions, travel, sports, exchange and traveling, spending time traveling in the global south. Organizations, okay, like Kolama, that met like-minded communities, couch surfing, my parents, travel, okay? And so where is school? And so much of the focus on global citizenship education, I agree, foundational lessons about global citizenship are developed in schools. If you don't know the world, okay, geography, basic geography of the world, the globe, okay, it's really important. But more than just that, it's the intersection between school and community, the school and the family. And it's this that we need to nurture. If we are committed to global citizenship education, it is these connections that we need to make as global citizenship educators, not just to make for the learners, but to make across each other, linking both formal, non-formal, and informal learning. In trying to define global citizenship education, I would go back to what was already there before. If some people say, oh, it's another kind of education called adjectival education. You must have heard of the Delors Pillar. If you haven't had, it's in 1996. Delors talked about learning to do, to know, to be, and to live together. Okay, and in last few years, they've added to transform oneself in society. Converting this now into COVID times, what did we have to know about COVID? We needed to know about what a virus is and how it's transferred. We needed to know how to do, okay, wash your hands. We needed to be distant, but we still needed to help each other. And a lot of that happened during the COVID times. But more importantly, as Amitabh said, we need to transform the inequalities that we have seen. So COVID, as Amitabh said, is such a potential if we are able to use it effectively. Hence, I'm talking that COVID is the potential to be learning through global citizenship, not for global citizenship, but now in action, where it's not about socially distancing, but it's about being together. It's not just about living together in our safe environments, but cutting across and working across different sectors and transforming ourselves in our society. And so this is the call. This is the call that I make as an educator. Paulo Freire, who celebrates 100 years in September, talked about that in reflecting on how context shapes educational practice, described that the banking method emphasizes permanence and becomes reactionary. And that's the worst kind of education that we want. On the other hand, a problem-posing education which accepts neither a well-behaved present or a predetermined future roots itself in the dynamic present. As Eric said, it becomes revolutionary. So we don't just need global citizenship education, we need a different kind of education that actually roots itself both in the formal, in the non-formal, and the informal learning. And we in the adult learning community, in the International Council of Adult Education, have just launched a campaign to call We Are ALE, We Are Adult Learning and Education, that believes that education is a powerful driver for justice, well-being, and change. And I invite you to be part of the campaign. If you believe that we need to have a presence, not just of schooling, but of a different kind of education, then the campaign is there for all of us, and We Are ALE. Thanks very much, Elish.